You are not a sinner and you don't need a savior. This is something that you were told, you were indoctrinated with, maybe you were born into it or persuaded into it, but it's simply a belief structure. It's not reality. It's something that you've been believing. Your subconscious mind has accepted it. And, if you've been going to some kind of religious institution where they're telling you this each and every Sunday, and that's been going on your entire life or for many years, then yeah, that's what your subconscious mind is hearing. That's what your subconscious mind is accepting. And what the subconscious mind does is it takes in this information and then it starts to express it and it starts to create your perception of reality and everything, okay? So that's how it works. But the moment you transcend this through awakening, you realize, okay, this is just another mental construct. This is just another dogma or doctrine that human beings have chosen to believe in, and they've been like projecting it onto other people, and they've been trying to proselytize and convert other people into their belief structure and that's how it works with like these different groups and these different belief systems. Like the more people that are on board, the more people that are believing whatever they are believing, that gives the in-group some sense of like power and some sense of assurance that, okay, their doctrine is legitimate and it carries some weight. However, again, when you awaken, when you transcend living from the mind, living from the ego, you see that this is just another thing, another theology, another belief structure, another doctrine that is easily transcended, and you can actually break free from it. And that's the thing, like when you really think about the essence of this teaching, of this doctrine of you being a sinner and you needing some kind of external salvation in order to be okay, in order to be complete or whole or saved, what this fundamentally does is it disempowers you. It makes you outsource your power onto some kind of savior figure, and it keeps you in these lower frequencies where you're just relying on someone else and you're hoping and you're expecting on someone else to come and save you. But the truth is, no one is coming to save you. The only salvation, the only savior that you need is the realization of who you really are. And when this happens, when you realize who you really are, you realize you don't even need that salvation that you thought you needed. Because it's not, if you want to view salvation as realization, then that's fine. But if you're viewing salvation as some kind of attainment, then that's incorrect. That's not what this is. That's not how it works. Because what the spiritual journey in essence is all about is remembering who you really are. You're not attaining it, you're not achieving it, you're remembering. And when you remember, then you wake up and you start to live from the light of life. You start to live from love. You start to live from your true divine essence. And so that's how it goes. But at that point, you realize that the only salvation you need is saving from the illusion that you need saving. Because if you're believing that you need saving, again, that's keeping you in this mindset of being not enough fundamentally, being somehow like inherently sinful and wrong and off and wicked and evil. Like all of these different doctrines are simply doctrines, okay? And you are not defined by a doctrine. You're not defined by some kind of dogma that someone came up with in the 5th century or the 4th century or years ago. Like that's just, no, absolutely not. You are so much more than that. And I'm not speaking from an egoic sense. I know whenever you start talking about like you are so much more than you think you are, and you are divine and you are this and you are that, like whenever people start talking like that, a lot of times it can be interpreted as egoic. But I'm not talking about the ego. The ego is simply a mental construct when you have this false sense of self, of being a finite independent being. But when you start meditating, which meditation does not require any doctrines. It doesn't require you to believe in anything. It doesn't require you to adhere to a certain religion. No. Meditation is free. Meditation is liberation. It's for anyone. It's for all people. And when you start meditating, what happens is you go beyond this sense of being a finite, separate self, and you realize that who you are is beyond the body, beyond the mind, beyond the ego, beyond space, and beyond time. As I always say, I tend to say that a lot when I'm explaining what happens through meditation when you experience these deeper states of consciousness and you go within. Instead of looking out there, you go within yourself. And this is something that, it's not new, it's not new age. No, this is ancient. This is something that has been practiced and experienced in many of the different contemplative traditions, especially in the East, mainly in the East, for thousands of years. So this is not just, again, something that I'm saying or that is new. No, this has been around for ever. And the interesting thing about this approach to spirituality is that, again, it doesn't require you to believe in anything. It says, hey, here's a method. Take this method. It's called meditation, and go experience the essence of your being for yourself. Instead of just believing, instead of just accepting what someone else is telling you about yourself and living from the mind. No, meditation is not the end-all be-all. It's simply a method. It's simply a vehicle that brings you beyond your headspace, your analytical thinking, egoic mind, into the serene stillness of your heart space. And this is also something that's kind of cool. When you start this process of meditation, this practice of meditation, and you're starting to kind of go beyond the beta brainwave state, and you're experiencing this deep relaxation, primarily in the alpha brainwave state, you realize that, oh my goodness, like there's this like inherent peace and stillness of my being that has always been there, that's been hiding behind this busy, anxious mind, and I never knew it. But thankfully, meditation has enabled me to go beyond my mind and to experience this innate stillness that I've always had. And so you start to sit with that, and as you rest in that stillness, this is where everything starts to change, because there's this divine pull, is what I call it. There's this pull that brings you into more stillness and more peace, and then eventually bliss and love. And this leads to this mystical experience of you not being some kind of egoic separate self, but you being one with everything, you being divine. And this is called the true self, with a capital T and a capital S. The self in Hinduism, the Atman, the self, capital S, same thing. This is that direct experience, and you walk away with experiential knowledge instead of intellectual knowledge, which this is where I lived most of the time before I started meditating and before I started experiencing the truth of my being for myself. I was living primarily from the headspace, from the intellect. I was obsessed with theology and philosophy and trying to figure out God and figure out the nature of my being and figure out the nature of reality and all these existential questions. But the problem was I was doing all of this, again, from my headspace, not knowing that the headspace, the thinking mind, is just the surface of who I really am. It's not who I am. I'm perceiving life in this 3D earth realm through a finite mind. However, I am not my mind. I can't be my mind. Why? Because I am what's aware of my mind. I am not my thoughts. I am what's aware of my thoughts. I am not my beliefs. I am what's aware of my beliefs. You see how that goes? And again, this is something else that meditation shows you. You are the awareness that sits behind all of these different things that we tend to hold on to and attach to and identify with, which that is the ego. The ego is to identify yourself with any kind of form or object or thought or anything. And that is a false sense of self. The ego is not your sense of self, because there's the true self, like I was talking about, capital T, capital S. The ego is a false sense of self. Big difference there. So you can know this for yourself. You can have peace and assurance that you don't need to be saved, because you are already whole, you are already complete, you are already divine, one with God, whatever you want to call it. And although your actions may not reflect that all the time, that still doesn't erase the divinity that is your inherent essence. Because the reason we behave in a way that goes against our true nature as being love, as being divine, is because we fall asleep and we start living from the ego. And when we live from the ego, we start to say things and do things and think in a way that is not in alignment with our true self. But that doesn't mean that our nature is fundamentally flawed. That doesn't mean that we are inherently not good enough or sinful or separated from God. No, it just means that we have drifted into this egoic illusion, into this egoic dream of separateness, because all of this behavior that is not in alignment with who we really are is rooted in separateness. And so separateness, or separation consciousness, is what is causing us to behave in a way that could be interpreted as quote-unquote sinful, okay? But again, just because we are quote-unquote sinning doesn't mean that we are sinful at our core. No, it just means that we are living in a way that goes against who we really are, because we have fallen asleep, we've become unconscious, and we're living according to an illusion, not according to reality. And Jesus understood this. He actually said, when he was on the cross, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." He knew that the only reason that the people that were doing what they were crucifying him, he knew that the only reason they were doing that was because they were living from this unconscious state of the ego. And if they knew who they really were, they would not be acting that way. But again, you are not your actions, you are not what you do, you are not what you don't do. You are so much more than that. You are pure awareness. You are I amness that sits behind anything that can be observed, anything that can be witnessed, and it's free, and it just is. And there is nothing that can conquer that, because fundamentally, that is love. Your true nature is love itself. And meditation shows you this. Meditation enables you to experience this directly. And the more you experience this directly for yourself, the more you can then take that truth and allow it to shine through your life, through your incarnation, through your temporary human existence. And you can profoundly change the world around you by walking in this truth, by walking in this revelation. So be encouraged. If you are someone that's been struggling with this belief, with this idea that you are not enough, that you're a sinner, that you need some kind of fixing, or you need someone to come and save you, I would invite you to meditate, to practice some self-inquiry, and to question those things that you've been taught about yourself. Question what so-and-so has told you is an absolute truth of reality, where, somehow, some way you are inherently sinful and you need some kind of divine figure to come and save you in order for you to be accepted and loved in the eyes of God. Really sit with that and ask yourself, does this actually resonate with me? Does this actually make sense? Does this actually align with my heart? Or is this just something that I've just accepted because I've been told that this is the way it is and I have to believe it because so-and-so has, this title in front of his name, and they know the truth and I'm just going to go with what they say. No, actually question it. Be curious, be open, and through meditation, start this process of deprogramming, letting go of all these things that you were holding on to as absolute fundamental truths, and then experience this emptiness, this stillness, this uncertainty of not knowing and being okay with not knowing. And then once you're there, all of a sudden, you realize that there's a greater truth that can't be known by the mind. It can't be known through doctrine. It can't be known through theology. It can only be known experientially through the heart. And meditation is a really good method for you to experience that. So I think that's it for today. If you found this video helpful, informative, or insightful, please leave a thumbs up at the bottom of the screen and be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.